and welcome to my channel. Today's episode of Dark Diary is about the most dangerous killer in the world, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is the infamous name given to an unidentified serial killer who operated in the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. Despite many investigations and countless theories, the true identity of Jack the Ripper has never been confirmed, and the case remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in history. It is believed that Jack the Ripper was responsible for the murders of at least 5 women between August and November of 1888. The victims, all prostitutes, were brutally attacked and mutilated in a similar fashion, leading investigators to believe that they were the work of the same killer. Number 1. Mary Ann Nichols. Found August 31, 1888. Mary Ann Nichols was born in Hampshire, England, in 1845. She moved to London and became a prostitute to support herself. At the time of her death, she was living in a lodging house in Whitechapel. Early in the morning of August 31, 1888, Mary Ann Nichols was found dead on Bucks Row in Whitechapel. Her throat had been slit, and her abdomen was mutilated. The police were immediately called, and the body was taken to the mortuary for examination. Nichols' murder marked the beginning of the infamous Jack the Ripper killings, which claimed the lives of at least 4 more women in Whitechapel. Despite a massive investigation by the police, Jack the Ripper was never identified or caught, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Mary Ann Nichols is remembered as the first victim of Jack the Ripper and as a tragic symbol of the poverty and desperation that plagued many women in Victorian-era London. Number 2. Annie Chapman. Found September 8, 1888. Annie Chapman was the second victim of the notorious serial killer known as Jack the Ripper. She was born on September 1841 in Paddington, London, England. She married John Chapman in 1869 and had 3 children with him, but their marriage ended in 1884, and Annie turned to prostitution to support herself. On September 8, 1888, Annie Chapman's body was discovered in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, Spitalfields. Her throat had been cut, and her abdomen was mutilated, with several organs removed from her body. Her clothing was also disturbed, indicating that a struggle had taken place. The murder of Annie Chapman was very similar to that of Mary Ann Nichols, the first victim of Jack the Ripper. The police immediately linked the 2 murders and began a massive investigation to try to catch the killer. Despite their efforts, Jack the Ripper was never identified or caught, and the case remains one of the most famous unsolved crimes in history. Elizabeth Stride. Found September 30, 1888. Elizabeth Stride was one of the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, the infamous serial killer who terrorized the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. Stride was born in Sweden in 1843 as Elizabeth Gustafsdotter, and she moved to England in the 1860s. She worked as a prostitute and was living in the East End of London at the time of her death. Stride was murdered on September 30, 1888, in the early hours of the morning. Her body was discovered in Dutfield's Yard, off Burner Street, now Henriques Street, in Whitechapel. She had been attacked with a knife and had a deep cut to her throat, but her body was not mutilated like those of the other Ripper victims. This has led some experts to speculate that the killer may have been interrupted before he could complete his attack. Stride's murder was the third in a series of 5 that were attributed to Jack the Ripper, and it occurred on the same night as the murder of Catherine Eddowes. Because the 2 killings took place within an hour of each other, some investigators have suggested that the killer was interrupted during the attack on Stride and fled the scene to carry out the murder of Eddowes. Mary Jane Kelly. Found November 9, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly was a victim of Jack the Ripper, a notorious serial killer who operated in the Whitechapel district of London, England in 1888. Kelly was believed to be the last of the 5 canonical victims of Jack the Ripper. On November 9, 1888, Kelly's body was discovered in her small room on Miller's Court, off Dorset Street. Her body had been mutilated beyond recognition, with her face completely disfigured, her throat cut, and her abdomen and other body parts removed. Kelly's murder was considered to be the most savage of all the Ripper's killings, and her identity was confirmed through various means, including a heart-shaped locket found on her person, a piece of her dress found at the crime scene, and an identification made by her landlord. And their bodies were found within hours of each other. Both women had their throats slashed, and Eddowes' body was also mutilated. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was killed on November 9, and her body was the most severely mutilated of all. The killer left few clues behind, and investigators struggled to identify any suspects. Several individuals were questioned and even arrested, but no one was ever charged with the murders. Theories abound about the true identity of Jack the Ripper, with suspects ranging from well-known figures like Prince Albert Victor to lesser-known individuals like Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant who was briefly considered a suspect. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe my channel.